for now, and here's something we recorded earlier. Now I'm joined by a Northside Dub who's just written his first book. Bono, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on your programme.
And congratulations. It's no surprise, but I'm sure it's a relief to a lot of people that you can write. It's a fantastic book.
I don't know if I should be insulted by that or complimented. We were talking about the editor, Sonny Mehta, and I very nearly didn't do the book because he apparently, he just said, yeah, he can write. And I thought, well, I always thought I could write. What do you mean? And the person who was explaining this to me said, no, he doesn't think anyone can write. It's his big compliment. He passed away, God bless him, Sonny Mehta, so...
How are the book people next to the rock and roll people? I imagine rock and roll people are pussycats next to the book.
They're
gang.
wild.
Yeah.
It's late nights, it's early mornings, they've been very kind to me. I mean, you always feel that, if you sort of cross discipline, you jump ship into somebody else's, they can blow a whistle. And they haven't. And they've, a lot of the literary people seem to be taken to the book. And I'm just hoping that they get out in front of the other crowd, which are coming for me, I'm sure.
Do you reckon, yeah?
I'm sure. But it's okay.
Is that inevitable every time, yeah? Okay.
I'd miss it if it wasn't there.
Yeah, you love it, really. Why write a memoir? Why now?
I had a lot of explaining to do. To myself, to my family, to my friends, tell them what I've been doing with my life, and in the case of the family, with their life, because they permission me in the end to be away as an artist, whatever you want to call what I've been doing. I wanted to write it down.
It's interesting you say to yourself, because I was thinking, I say it could be a dangerous thing to sit down and do a stock take of your life for a fella, is it?
I'm not saying it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely changed me, and I don't know if it is for the better, but it certainly sort of stopped me in my tracks. The best bit of it was, it allowed me to spend some time quietly on my own. And though I get up early anyway to read and write, whether it's U2 or articles or whatever, letters, I really had to spend a lot of time on my own. And, for a person as noisy as me, and as I'm sometimes very social, I found I enjoyed my company more than I thought I would,
There's a sense in it that you are at a point where you're reassessing your life. You talk about, kind of apprehensive about the third act. You talk about you want to get beyond who you have been and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do some measure of audit, don't you? There was, you and I spoke before about Richard Rohr, the Franciscan friar, and his book Falling Upwards, and he quotes Carl Jung, who says, not only are the things that worked for you and made you successful in the first half of your life not helpful in the second half of your life, they positively can work against you. They really can get in your way, and that's worth examining if that's true. And so, an example would be talk about somebody else, like a brilliant musician.
Talk about yourself.
Oh, okay. Can I talk about age and malaria?
See, this is the thing about the memoir interview.
I know. Well, it's just, if you're a person who, for instance, got some of the most, broke down some doors with your shoulder, and you have, but you successfully broke into wherever you were trying to get to. That's not going to work in the second half of your life, and you might just have to look and see if, well, maybe if there's the key in the lock, maybe just turn it. I'm sort of, born a little bit with my fists up, metaphorically, and sometimes just even walk into RTE, can feel myself, and it's okay. It's like there's nobody jumping out from behind bushes, at least yet.
So you're always looking for a fight, yeah?
No, I'm
ready for a fight?
aware that there might be one mentally, or I'm a little bit like that, and looking for trouble where maybe there isn't any, or going out to look for trouble, which is worse. And I think at this point, that's just not a successful strategy. I'm trying to put down my hands, and I'm coming to this word surrender, which I still don't really understand. I should have put a question mark at the end of it, at the end of the title. But to surrender to your bandmates or whomever, your maker, your wife. This does not come easy to me.
And stop fighting with yourself as well, I presume.
Yeah, I was just saying, I do want to make peace with myself, but I'm not ready to make peace with the world as yet.
Oh, good. We'd be glad to hear that. Listen, you say an interesting thing in here, right? And I know I'm not going to throw back all, select bits of the book at you, but this was interesting. You talk about service, ambition, duty, loyalty, desire to be the best, right? All those things. You wonder now if they were a cover for something else. The desire to be the centre of attention, a swollen sense of self. Are you kind of starting to think that Bono has ego issues?
Look, what use would a rock star be without a messianic complex? Do you know what I mean? And
but are you beating yourself up about it?
No. I'm just, I think one thing that's so great about U2 is we didn't play the, how do we get here card? Oh, God, I'd rather be anywhere else than being interviewed, or, oh, wow, gosh, what a bummer, we're on top of the pops, how did this happen? We never did that. But at the same time, as enjoying making a show out of yourself, which is, what I do for a living, it's just worth asking yourself, where does that come from? Why do you need 25,000 people a night screaming, I love you, to feel like a normal person? That's surely not normal. They're just, it was the right time to ask those questions. And then, of course, I've discovered these incredible sort of insights, which I was not naive to have at an early age, which is things like everyone I was right there. Mount Temple Comprehensive, Ali. I meet Ali. I meet the four members of the band. We join each other the same week. I've never said it like that before. That's interesting. We join each other, Ali and I and the band. But other things, other insights, like as well as everything you need is often right around you if you can just see it. But I also learned to understand that the things that were seemingly wounds were great opportunities opening up as well. So, you lose your mother at an early age, or puberty. Lots of people went through much worse. But this is the gift, it becomes a gift for you because you're trying to fill that hole with music, with friendship, it's become such a gift to me. A lot of the things that I might have complained about just by writing about it.
Yeah,
I understood that better.
Yeah, okay. the 25,000 people to make you feel okay. You call it in the book the need to be loved at scale, and I think you put a lot of it down to that need, down to your dad ignored you.
Well, there's two ways, isn't there, to turn a sort of grandstanding stadium singer out of a wee boy. You can tell them everything they do is really worth hearing, and get them the piano lessons, and did you hear that, and or you can just ignore them, and that worked much better for me, turns out.
You mentioned then your mother dying when you were at that young stage. It's kind of the casual cruelty of the universe in a way. The way you found out even that Iris had died is kind of quietly devastating, isn't it? Tell me about that.
Yeah, and so it was my mother's father and mother's wedding anniversary, and their 50th or 40th, and we'd all been out. It was a big occasion, and we took a room in the pub. I forget the name of it now, but it was a big deal to get a room in the pub, and came home. My grandfather had a brilliant time. He danced with all his daughters. He had a heart attack, fell off the bed, kicked the bucket, literally, in this case. And I wake up the next morning to hear this news, and my mother tells me, and she's the eldest sister, so she goes off to organise everything, including the funeral. I next see her at the funeral, and as my grandfather, Gags Rankin, is being lowered into the ground, my mother faints, we think, but she had an aneurysm, and that was really the last conversation I had with her was that morning. So unusual. And
then you go back to the house post your grandfather's funeral, and you hear the adults talking, right?
Yeah, that's right. Those whispers, like leaves blowing around. Yes, whispers. Iris, she's Iris. And then I remember my uncle arriving in, and the kind of wailing, the keening thing I suppose we do in Ireland, and it was a very close family, and yes, I remember I remember the grief of that family, and it made a mark on me for sure. But they say, was it the Dalai Lama who says, we begin our meditation on life with death, and sounds like a bit of a bummed out thing to say, but I think it's probably true. And it started with me right there at puberty, and defiance, is the essence of romance. Defiance is what rock and roll music is to me. That's what the joy of U2's music is, the ecstatic, it's life force. And we're not misery guts kind of, shoe staring band. So that rage against the dying of the light, that's at the heart of who we are.
And then you were very angry with your father. And the weird thing is it almost as if you knew something more than you knew all the time? Yeah.
You're referring to my cousin turning out to be my brother.
The phone call you got, but it begins with that phone call, which was so weird when Norman rang you.
Yeah, in the book, Norman rings and he goes, "You won't believe this. I have to tell you something about our family." And I said that our cousin is our brother, and he said, "What?" And I don't know where it came from, but I must have known that. And it's probably part of my facing off with my father too, that I felt that And he wasn't really ignoring me, by the way. He was just being an Irish dad at that time, but an Irish dad with a lot on his mind and his heart and his soul. And the music, strangely, was the great balm for him. So I would walk into Cedarwood Road and the stereo, and he'd be conducting it with knitting needles, you know, listening to La Traviata. And I didn't know what La Traviata was about. I didn't think he knew what it was about, but we kind of both knew what it was about at the same time. And, you know, the opera that was Bob Hewson. Yeah.
And when and why did it emerge that Scott was your brother?
I think Scott suspected something, and he just wanted it out in the open, and recently. So we discussed this maybe when I was writing the book. I said, "This is your call," and he just wanted it for his kids, and you know, I loved him before.
Yeah,
as a cousin,
you guys
anyway.
were very close.
We were actually close, and I remember, I remember the grief falling on his mother too, when my mother passed, and I guess the complexity of that is I now understand, and also my father's distractedness, and I feel very, very close to my father as I wrote him in the book, because I started to realize how difficult it was for him in that moment. And I just thought I wasn't there for him really. And, I wish I could have been. And there's fantastic stuff in Finnegan's out in Dorky in the Sorrento Lounge. We'd meet on the Sunday and he'd always say, the same line, anything strange or startling, which is so Irish, Yeah. And I'd say, like, everything strange or startling. Do you know, what do you mean? And I'd tell him stories and try to impress him. But he had mischief. And I hope I've painted him with that too, because he did have humor. I mean, he would give me a $5 for Christmas. And when we were number one in America, or socks.
Yeah.
So he had that mischief, that dub mischief. And an attitude, and this is one thing I like, really, what I love about Irishness, at least my version of Irishness is, my experience of Irishness is not the obvious. It's my father's working class Catholic from Cowtown, from Oxhamstown Road, who listened to the opera.
Yeah.
His mother was listening to the cricket. He played cricket. He read. He was a clever man, and so it's just not what you think. Nothing's what you think it is.
Yeah.
And I was saying to somebody the other day, it's like the U2 story. It's like a Welshman, an Englishman, and two Irishmen go into a pub.
Yeah.
And one of them's only one of them's a proper Catholic Irish. One of them's kind of grows up in the Church of Ireland. Me. And is suspicious of all religious traditions, and then ends up with this deep faith. It's bizarre.
And I want to come back to some of that. Can we stick with Scott for 1 minute? There's just two things I want to ask you about it. One is that Bob, your dad, was alive when you got this news, and you went straight to him.
Yeah.
Which must have been an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, of course he was, he just kind of, he took it very seriously, and I asked him, did he love my mother? And he said, yes. And I said, how can that be? And he said, it can. And I felt that was all I had the right to ask of him. And, he was very respectful. And
so it was okay.
Yeah. We worked it through. In a way, it's a great relief and release, because now you know what you were looking at, but you didn't know what you were looking at. Yeah. And I think, and I loved, Barbara too, and I still do. It's just when my mother passed, she helped, bring me up. Was an amazing woman, and Scott's brothers, Adam and Michael I love too. So that we're very close, and actually we're all quite philosophical about it. So we're okay.
Yeah.
But Scott's a very private person and very high-minded, high ideals, so I have to be careful, because now I'm in public. I don't want to drag him too much into the public sphere, though he did wish to be reported accurately in the book.
Okay, you mentioned four guys walk into a pub there. So U2, one of the great bands of all time, we could say, like giving so much joy to so many people. I mean, most people are lucky to have one iconic song if they're lucky, and you guys have dozens of them. Have there been moments where you're able to stop and take in the enormity of that and be really proud of yourself?
Not as many as there should be. In the book, and strangely, the last time we met in Madrid, Brendan, you did an article a few years ago on our band, and it might have been the day before or the day after, but there's a moment on that circular stage in Berlin where I normally, I thank the audience for giving us a great life. I like to do that every night just because they have. And in this scene in the book, I imagine the audience is just sucked out of the room, and I'm just left with them. And I thank them for giving me a great life. I thank Edge, Adam and Larry for giving me a great life. And I see them back in Mount Temple Comprehensive, in the music room, in the red corridor and the green corridor and the yellow corridor. I do little pictures of them. But as I'm looking at them, I really understand how great they are as musicians. And I needed to give that up more over my life, because I think they've always been pretty good. And you and I talked about this back then, because it was on my mind, it was happening. I'd finally got to a place where I thought, wow, U2's really something. And I felt that I'd caught up with them, as a singer. So I wasn't being down on myself, they're great, I'm not. And I said, no, we're fucking great. Yeah. This is as good as, power trio gets, and I'm the singer standing in front of them. You've got bass, drums, guitar, and when that can fill, an arena with thunder, and they're at ease with it. They're just playing around. They're having fun with their talent. Yeah, it's about time. It took 40 years, but it's finally like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, because you do paint a picture in the book of that you always there were times, certainly, where you were in your breaking down of doors and the constant desire to push it on to the next level, that you might have pushed them a bit too hard at times?
Yeah, but spare me whinging rock stars. Do you know what I mean? That's like, yeah, it's the gang, it's like, you want to, we have you describe Everest, then you climb it. And okay, there's an element, let's call it, there's an element of, what would you call it? It's like maybe lying to yourself, because you think, why do you think you can do that? But I didn't feel like we were having anyone on. I really felt we had this thing. I really felt we had something, and I just wanted us to take it all the way. But I'm sure it got a bit tiring. I might have used, as Bob Dylan said, I might have used a little too much force. And it was just, it was a bit over earnest, maybe. Just, it's that old joke, isn't it, about football? It's said in a Northern English accent that, it's not a matter of life and death. It's something much more important. Yeah. That's kind of where we were with our music.
The earnestness reminds me of, there have been various little crises in U2 down the years, but one of the early crises, and I mean, it is quite funny, the band nearly split up very early on, kind of because, starting with that, The Edge did not think that this was the best way to do God's work in the world.
The Zen Presbyterian. Yeah, well, I was just back in Mount Temple Comprehensive. I was walking through it, read some stuff out for the 6th-year students who wanted to sit through it. And they laughed, and they're very kind to me, actually. So still an amazing, progressive campus, you know, it really is. But I found myself in the last week just going, wow, what was it that happened here? Because this is a non-denominational school. The only thing they wouldn't talk about is religion, but yet something happened and we were all touched by it. And I realised that it was happening not just in Temple Comprehensive, but all over the country. And I think there's a word for it in different traditions: revival, renewal. And you might remember, but charismatic renewal.
I vaguely remember it from when I was a kid. It was in the 70s, a big thing in Ireland.
It was. And I remember cynical and amusing reports in the Irish Times of people jumping for Jesus in the RDS.
Happy clappy is how we
kind of
would
happy
describe
clappy.
it, yeah.
But what was striking about it was at a time of deep sectarian division in our country. It was happening to Protestant and Catholic alike. There were nuns hanging out with Anglican priests and evangelicals. I mean, it was a really, interesting time, and we got caught up in that. And we met some extraordinary people that we learned a lot from. Those sacred texts, which I still hold on to so tightly, were taught brilliantly. There was a couple called the Rose, Chris and Lillian Rowe. But they were like, the world is broken, clearly. And if you want to be part of fixing it, you might have to put down this music thing. And they were, at first, looked like they accepted us, even though we looked different. And remember, they're hanging out with the Virgin Prunes as well as U2. So you see Gavin Friday with his, his eraser head, David Lynch haircut and boffer boots and a skirt. Googie looking like a kind of some sort of, Aladdin Sane album cover walking down Grafton Street. And they first seemed to accept us, but then they were like, nah, maybe you need to change. Maybe you need to, if you want to serve God, it wasn't put down your cross and follow me, it was kind of put down your guitars and follow me. And Ed was ready to do it. And then he told me, I went over to see him and he said, I can't do this anymore. I can't just figure this with what I believe anymore. And I went, well, I understand. I've had those questions myself, and then went round to Larry and he was the same. Then went round to Adam and he was like, what? Are you mad? This is the man who's like, all he wants in his life is to play the bass in a rock and roll band. And it's like 4 strings are better than 6. And he's like, what? Oh, but even Adam, he goes, well, I can't do this on my own, so I'm with you. But then, and this is after our first album's done really well in the US, Irish band really happening. This is our second album and a second album's tour. So we have to go and see another God, Paul McGuinness, and tell him. And he's just sitting there and he's like, so let me just get this right. So you've been speaking to God, have you? And we're like, yeah, we have. And God has been telling you what? You no longer to be a band. You can just call God up on a phone and he tells you what to do. Well, it's not exactly like that, Paul, but yes, we have, we're pretty sure God wants us out of the band with this other stuff we want to do with our lives. And he's like, so how do you think God feels about like a legal contract? Because I've signed a legal contract on your behalf to go on tour. And I'm like, okay, maybe we got the God thing wrong, And we go off on that tour. And it was amazing, actually. But even at the end of it, Edge, it was still a nagging question for Edge, and probably for all of us. We hadn't resolved it. And I asked Ali to marry me, and I went away to Jamaica. Chris Blackwell, who discovered Bob Marley, gives us Golden Eye, which he owned. It's a rough but beautiful, extraordinary sort of place with no phones and no nothing. But it was amazing for us. We were broke, but it was Bob Marley's vibe. Bob Marley was around. And Edge started to write Sunday Bloody Sunday. And he was trying to figure out a way of making the music matter to the exterior world rather than just the interior life. And when I hear Sunday Bloody Sunday now, and I'm so grateful that he took us there.
Yeah.
But I also hear Bob Marley. I can hear, broken bottles on the children's feet, bodies screwed across dead end street. How long? If you think about it.
Yeah.
And then to sort of tie this up, and not in a bow, but not in a knot either, Chris Blackwell, when he gets delivered this album called October, which is full of these sort of ecstatic religious art songs, everyone else is panicking. But he's like, no, Bob Marley was, of course, he's very, very posh, and he said, no, this is, it's not Rastafarianism, but yes, these are big questions, and Bob wrote about God and women and the world outside and protest songs. They're all the same to him, and so, but that gave us back our band.
Yeah. People will be surprised, I think. People know you're a man of faith, but I think they'll be surprised reading the book just how important Jesus is in your life. I mean, it's definitely the only rock memoir I've ever read that includes the letter from St. Paul to the Corinthians at length.
It's a Eugene Peterson message translation, by the way, just if you're a little tired of it at weddings and funerals.
Okay. So, and it is, Scripture is, the Bible is your Bible, essentially. That's where your
it's a great ode to love. I mean, look, Beatles wrote that. Was their core subject was love. Yeah, I remember we have these. Maybe this is too long for your program, but before we go on stage, we should be just. I go into Noel Gallagher when he's having a great time. It was the same with Oasis. They're having a laugh. Their friends are around, and then somebody goes, "Yep, Tom," and they walk on stage to get ready to go on stage for U2. It's like, oh my God, it's a whole thing, and it's a prayerful thing, and we make sure that we lock the doors so nobody can get in, and it's quiet. And Dennis Sheehan, God rest his soul, who's our tour manager, he'd explain to people, they're just having a quiet time. We never want to do the public prayer, that sort of, let everyone see you do all that.
Yeah.
And so it's Live 8, not Live 8, but Live 8. 20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper, Paul McCartney opens Live 8 in London, and we're the band. U2 are playing the band. So he's with us, but we're having our moment getting ready to go on, and he is... we didn't know it was him knocking at the door, trying to get in, but Dennis is saying, "I'm sorry," So we finish our prayers, and I go, "Who was that?" And he said, "It was actually Sir Paul, but he's gone now." And I said, "Oh God, no!" I ran out and I see, he's like Mozart, he's like Johann Sebastian Bach, for God's sake, and he's walking across the back, and I run up and I go, "Paul, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Just coming over, having a, I was just trying to say, we're all going on together." And I said, "Look, we have this moment where with prayers, and I don't want, it sounds excruciating. I'm really," he goes, "Listen, I would have loved to be part of your prayers. I would love that." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll ask, anytime. I'll tell Dennis." And he goes, "What about now? We should be praying now. So at this point, Larry and Adriana were walking over. We're behind stage. Everyone can see us. I'm going, well, we'd have to go, and he goes, now? Are we doing it now or not? And we bow our heads in front of all the kind of, industry people and all this. Yeah. I'm feeling like one of those country acts or, I'm like, oh. And we bow our heads, and I can't remember exactly the prayer. He prayed it. But it was something like, make us instruments of your peace.
Yeah.
And I remember it, and I remember thinking, of course the Beatles. Of course, this is their power of love. All you need is love. And, love in the abstract is, can become concrete and it can change lives and change the course of history, the Vietnam War, love and peace and all that. But love to me is best expressed in a child born in dung and straw, and I see not just the poetic genius of this, utter fragility. It's not New Age, my faith. Yeah, it's
old
not
school.
It's in that sense.
Yeah.
Although all the kids were not baptized into any one religion, they're baptized Christians, and that was very deliberate. But the Judeo-Christian framework, he said seriously, is it's given us a lot. And I wonder, as people now in this country crushed by what's happened in the churches, and in some parts of the geography of this country, the church has been filled with hate and bile. Some part you've paedophile, priests, and some part you've had, real abuses of faith. And to spiritually abuse somebody is the worst of all, because they can't get back their faith. And I feel like the country's been spiritually abused in a way, and it's a shame, because it is a beautiful thing to walk into a mass or a synagogue. I even, I go to Seder or Passover. I love these symbols, this ritual, this, this dance, this ceremony. I'm more attracted to it now than I thought I could ever be. And I'm still not good at it, and not practicing well, I'm practicing, but I'm not practicing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Do you say in the book you're a follower of Jesus, but you can't keep up?
I just can't keep up. That's why I can't find it hard to put the badge on, because people are going to point to me going, ha, look at you.
Yeah.
You're not going to make that standard.
Did faith help you lead a relatively normal life and help you avoid the excesses of rock and roll and that?
I don't think I avoided the excesses of rock and roll. I think faith has helped me not be destroyed by my own, ego. Although it's an open question for many, and maybe from my missus and my kids. But it's a plumb line that you measure yourself by, I suppose. And in my case, it's not great. It's like somebody said, the sacred texts are like a reflective pool, and it's not narcissism, because you might see yourself as you are. And that's not always admiring. You feel loved, and you should feel loved.
Okay.
But by your maker, and you should not feel accused. That's not how love works. And if I'm working at this, but if you have a daily practice, you should be reminded just how much you're loved. By God, and no one else can judge you, whoever you are, your sexuality, your whatever you've been through, come as you are. And you won't find, I just wonder if Jesus would be hanging out with half the people that we call, religious figures. It'd be boring for him.
You say you didn't avoid the excesses of rock and roll. You said after your friend Michael Hutchins' death, you say that you kind of thought about it a bit and thought, are we getting a bit too good at living the good life? Was there a bit of self-destructiveness in the air around then?
I mean, I just think, what do they say? The Irish, our relationship with alcohol is like America's relationship with guns.
Yeah.
Like, what problem? So, yeah, there's, I mean, I like to have a good time. I think I am a good time. But, you can take that so far. You don't want to be... I loved bumping into you around town and, in my 30s, and it's great. But there is, there's a point where suddenly you're not playing with fire, the fire's playing with you. And I watched that with Michael Hutchence, who was just the most perfect pop star, like the nearest I will get to meet, like, say, Mark Bolan of T-Rex. It was effortless for him. His beautiful voice and his lisp. He had this lisp which girls just couldn't get past. It's just, okay, so he's so amazing, and a kind of pockmarked face that didn't come up in photographs, and he it was just brilliant, and suddenly then, he disappeared into this hole, and he met somebody who utterly adored him, Paula. It was very hard because she also loved Bob Geldof, and we were in the middle of that. That was a hard moment. It was all just getting a little messy. We're just not for that.
It was very sad when they asked you and Ali to be a godparent to the child, and you had to say, I'm sorry, we can't do this.
Well, it was a mistake. I deeply regret that. But there was a young child involved, and we just didn't want to feel, whilst they were on this very self-destructive path, that we could just be there going, yeah, everything's fine. Wow, yeah, let's be the godparents.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay, we'll take a break and we'll be back in a minute with more from Bono.
Brendan O'Connor on RTE Radio 1.
Home Instead caregivers make a difference.
Will we sit over here this morning, Tom, and let you feel the heat of that sun?
Home Instead, to us it's personal.
With everyone looking to shrink their bill these days, Dunnes Stores gives you new ways to save on your shop with double savers. First, you'll save in the aisles when you fill your basket with fantastic low prices across thousands of great products. Then you'll save again at the till with our 5 off 25 grocery voucher. Shrink your bill with double savers, new from Dunnes Stores. Dunnes Stores, always better value. Terms and conditions apply. Voucher can be used on next in-store grocery shop of €25 or more.
At AIB, we know business owners make hundreds of decisions every day. Some small, some monumental, all of them important. We're here to make one big decision a whole lot easier. Change your business current account to AIB in just a few simple steps so you can get back to business. Search Why AIB for more information. AIB, let's get to work. Terms and conditions apply. Allied Irish Banks PLC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us what... The Lotto jackpot is an estimated €4 million. Play responsibly, in-store, in-app or at lottery.ie. The National Lottery. It could be you.
The Tile Style Autumn Sale ends this Sunday. It's your last